You're listening to Sustainably Geeky, the podcast for everyday environmentalists.
Hi, and welcome to Sustainably Geeky, episode 9. My name is Jennifer, and I am joined by Jen and
hello, guys,
and Michelle.
Hi.
Michelle is a special guest today, and she will be talking to us about composting. We normally have a couple others on the show. Chris couldn't be with us tonight, and Stefan has actually stepped down from the show, so he won't be on any longer. But Chris should be joining us again next time, so be looking out for that. So yeah, like I said, we're going to talk about composting today. And last episode, we talked about food. Specifically, we delved into food production and the consequences of our production system. We briefly touched on composting, but we wanted to save the bulk of that conversation for this show because we knew we had an expert in the subject. So we will really be delving more into that. But before we do, Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And you own the Green Plant, so tell us about that company and why you got into that and kind of, what inspired you to take that concept and run with it.
Sure. So I own a company called The Green Plant. It's been open just a little over a year. I started it because I just saw the need in this area for us to reduce the amount of waste that we're sending to the landfill. I'm a gardener. That's something I'm really passionate about. And so to me, it just makes sense to use these food scraps to create compost, which is a really valuable resource in the garden. So I wanted to create something that was good for the environment, but also had like a social component too. So I partner so my business is curbside composting. And what I do is I pick up compost scraps from people's houses, and then I take it to a local farm and I compost it at the farm. And so people can have the choice to have finished compost back. My customers can, but if they don't have the need for finished compost, then at least the compost gets put to a good use at the farm.
Yeah, that's awesome. What made you, think of this? What inspired you to kind of do the curbside pickup? Because prior to this, I had never heard of that concept, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, there's actually actually more than a couple. There's other cities that have programs like this, and I had heard about one in Austin and one in Boston. And I was, out for a walk one day, taking my dog for a walk, and I was thinking like somebody needs to do that here. And I thought, I'm like, why not me? So I've given it.
Yeah. I'm the one that thought of it.
Dang, now I got to do it.
Yeah. That's awesome. A lot of people have great ideas and say exactly what you said. Someone should do that, and they don't go through with it and do it themselves. So that's really admirable that you actually, said, hey, I could do that. And it is providing a great service to the area. We live in the Killeen, Texas area, for those that aren't local. And it's the only one that I know of, and it's been growing little by little. I think more people are learning about it and excited because not everyone has the ability or patience to compost. So It's a good way to give back. So
I went to the farmers market at the Pearl District here in San Antonio, and I saw the exact same setup that you have, Michelle.
Really?
It's called something different, but it's the same, 5-gallon bucket, and they had a bunch of them underneath their little, pop-up tent, and they were, just a little vendor at the farmers market trying to get some more clients. So I was just like, oh, it's spreading.
That'll be me this spring doing the same thing. So.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, and so it's a great alternative for people who, like I said, really want to compost, but maybe you live in an apartment, you don't have a yard, or you just travel a lot, or you just really don't feel like messing with it. It can get messy and, take up some space. So if you are one of those folks who can't or don't want to compost, look in your area and see if you have something similar, because it is a great resource and way to divert from the landfill. So yeah. So I guess we will just kind of start by talking about what compost is, because, people may hear about it a lot, but not know exactly what that means. So compost is actually a verb and a noun. The noun is decayed organic material used as plant fertilizer. And then if you use it as a verb, it's the act of making the compost. So turning that biodegradable waste into that plant fertilizer that you use. So it's interesting because a lot of people have done it for years and they don't even think of it as like a green thing, a green activity, right? To them, it's just, I'm saving money because I'm not having to buy it. Or this is what we've always done in my family. But there's really been a resurgence in this movement, I think, in the last few years as people become more environmentally conscious. So anything you guys want to add to that before we move on?
Well, I was at Fort Hood for 12 years, and I was in always like the pollution prevention, solid waste management field. And we did a lot of waste characterization studies, just looking at what went into our landfill. And we found out that, anywhere from 30 to 40% by weight goes into the landfill as food waste or organics in general. So that could be landscape waste, just leaves or grass clippings, but a lot of it was food as well, especially because it's so heavy and water dense compared to dead tree limbs. So we actually started up a food waste composting program the past couple of years at Fort Hood, and I just love that there's also, residential availability in a lot of the cities, especially in Texas. That used to not be a thing. And we kind of got the idea just from Austin. They kind of were our closest neighbor that took that challenge on, and so we adopted it as well. But what Michelle is doing is way more environmentally friendly, probably, driving to the people's houses that actually want to do it versus having a collection truck that uses a lot of fuel and all of that stuff. So anyways, but yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Some of the programs, they even use bicycles, in bigger cities where, you don't have to go that far, which is even more environmentally friendly. It's just not super possible here in Texas.
From Copper's Cove to Salado, you wouldn't want to ride a bike.
A little far. Not in the
30 or 40 miles. Yeah. And some cities, like City of Killeen, doesn't have compost pickup, but they do pick up yard scraps. So if your city doesn't offer full compost, they probably will pick up, brush or tree limbs, like Jen said, things that they actually can take to a facility that they have and make into compost or mulch or something. So definitely look for that as well. So let's talk about the kinds of things you can compost. Jen, you mentioned a lot of different items, but even that stuff isn't everything. Like Michelle will take, paper, cardboard, greasy piece of boxes, pretty much anything that can break down anything but dairy and meat in her bins.
And is that because you're using worms?
No, I'm not using worms. I use chickens.
Chickens.
Okay.
Chickens do all the work.
Yeah. So it depends on where you live and who your compost facility is and what process they're utilizing. So at Fort Hood, we have static aerated piles, which means you don't have to flip and turn the windrow, which is just kind of a pile, like a triangular pile of the compost. So we have these pipes that we have an air pump. Like basically it's just those inflatables bouncy inflatables that your kids jump on and stuff. There's these air pumps that you can just buy, and they blow those jumpy houses up. Anyways, we use those and we just push air through HDPE pipes that have holes in them, and that airflow that goes through the pile reduces the need to turn the pile, and it also accelerates the decomposition process. So when you have more oxygen available, the bacteria that are eating and decomposing the food can basically multiply more quickly and can break down the food faster than when it's in like a different type of system, like maybe like Michelle has, where you have to hand turn it and it has a much slower decomposition. So there's a lot of different types of commercial composting.
What's the
designs.
length of time on that system? Like from the time they
So
start the pile?
you really only technically have to leave it on the pipe for 2 weeks, but we
Wow.
sometimes can do, longer. And it really just depends on a lot of different variables. So like outside temperatures and rainfall. So a lot of those elements can affect the bacteria. Basically, people call composting bacteria farming. And so you're just trying to keep these bugs alive essentially. And there's all different types. I don't remember all the different names, but they all can survive in different temperature zones and different types of conditions. So if we get like a big rain event, then we would leave the compost on the pipes for a little bit longer. And you have to take temperatures daily to make sure, and that the temperature is actually just gauging the activity level in the pile of the bugs. So if your pile gets too hot, that just means those bugs are like jumping around and they're crazy. And they're doing what they're supposed to do, but sometimes it can get too hot, and that's when fires can happen. Sometimes if the right conditions, yeah, if
They
the
just
right
spontaneously
conditions,
combust?
there's a
No
lot of
way.
commercial composters out there whose piles actually do catch fire. And a lot of them, it might just be because they're doing yard waste and they don't have the right carbon to nitrogen ratio. So that's another balancing act that you have to do with your they basically just call it like the different inputs. So if you have, so there's all these very technical spreadsheets out there that you can use. There's even software programs where you can dial in, how much by weight you're putting in for like grass clippings versus leaves versus food waste. And if you're adding dairy or meat, those temperatures have to be at a certain level for a certain amount of days, depending on the type of composting site that you have. So for Fort Hood, we only had to have like 3 days in a row of a temperature above like 130, 140. But we were usually a little bit higher than that. We were usually around like the 160, 170 range. If you go higher than 180, then a lot of your bacteria actually start to die off, like the type that you want that in that pile. Some bugs can survive in the higher temperatures, but you're not going to get full decomposition of that food waste in the way that you want. So again, it's just kind of like for those compost experts out there, they know what they're doing. For the general public, you might not have to worry too much about that because you're just doing, like if you're doing backyard composting and in your house, you probably don't need to take temperatures. You're not going to want to put like dairy or meat in there. That's just the main thing. So if when you start adding the dairy and the meat, that's when you really have to start making sure that the pathogens are getting killed off and you're not going to be creating a problem.
And that tends to also attract little critters you don't want.
Yeah.
A lot more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to repeat, like what Jen is talking about is primarily for commercial composters. It sounds like a lot, but don't think that's what you have to do if you want to start composting. Like that's for big piles and a lot of stuff. And I don't think most of us will have that much in our backyard unless, you have a really crazy backyard. But if you want to compost at home, let's talk about some of the different options for that. So for instance, I have a compost pile, which is literally just a pile that I throw stuff in. And I do flip it sometimes. I'm not the best at flipping it, so it tends to break down kind of slow. But I recently actually just built with Michelle's help 2 separate pens so that I can actually put some in one, and then as it's decomposing, I can start another one and actually be able to flip it without having to dig through what's on top to get to it. So what, I guess, is your experience with the different types of composting? Michelle, do you want to talk a little bit about some different types of them?
Yeah, so if you're thinking about composting at home, there's a few different options. You can choose to do the open system, which is what you've got, the piles that are open to the air and the elements, or you can choose to do a closed bin system, which a lot of people do, especially if you've got smaller space, or I'm not really sure if you could do it. I'm sure people have done it like on an apartment balcony or things like that. But those are the bins that are on like the tumblers that they're closed off so critters and things can't get inside of them. And then there's also vermicomposting, which is using worms to break down your food. And you can make or you can buy, little worm towers for the worms to live in. You just throw your scraps in those systems, and then the worms eat them up and turn it into compost.
So with the closed system, it's just the stuff rots in the dark, or
yeah, you want to add your stuff, your waste in there. You still want to make sure you've got a good balance of greens and browns, but you can turn, those a lot. So sometimes those break down faster because they're easier to turn than like the outdoor open system where you're, usually have a pitchfork or something and you're turning it by hand. But I've heard that they sometimes I don't have that system. That's not what I use. So I don't know as much about it. But I've heard that sometimes the moisture can't escape from those bins very well and then get really wet and stinky too. But I don't know. Can't speak to that.
I would imagine it could smell a lot better, a lot worse with those.
So I know we briefly mentioned like carbon to nitrogen, browns and greens. So just to clarify for everyone, your nitrogen is going to come from stuff that's still alive. So like your food waste, your green grass clippings, things like that. And your carbon would come from, like your wood chips or your dead leaves and things like that. Right, Michelle? How do you do your carbon to nitrogen mixing? Like, how do you gauge that?
So I don't gauge it because once I pour it out there, the chickens pretty much have their way with the food scraps, and it's going to throw everything off anyway. But some of the things from your house that are considered browns would be like your toilet paper rolls, the cardboard inside of those, paper towel rolls, paper, shredded paper, junk mail.
Newspaper is really good for compost, right?
Yes. Yeah, and there are some things like that you can't recycle, like cardboard pizza boxes you mentioned. You can't recycle those, but you can compost them. And also paper towels, those can be composted too. So those are some things from your home environment that you could put. Also, you mentioned the leaves; those are really great. And in the fall here, I go around asking my neighbors for their bagged leaves, just for my personal compost too.
So I want to talk about worm composting really quick. I did an experiment in Belton when I first moved into my house. So I got like one of those, just like large totes at Home Depot. And we started like throwing our food scraps in there, and we would put like newspaper to kind of like keep the moisture in there and all that. It got so hot in the garage that the worms like completely melted.
Oh
And I was
no.
like, oh no.
Where did you get the worms? Did you dig them up, or did you buy them somewhere?
You can buy them, yeah. So lesson learned: don't put them in the garage. They actually are like human beings as far as temperature is concerned. So if you can't if you can't live in your garage 24/7, then your worms are not going to be happy. So a lot of people actually put it underneath their kitchen sink. They just have like a small little 5-gallon bucket or something. But again, you have to be careful about what you put in there. They really only want like fruits and vegetables and nothing too acidic. Like don't put limes and lemons, something that would kind of burn them up a little bit. So, but one fun fact is that vermicomposting, when you buy that stuff to, grow your food in, it is the most expensive thing that you could buy. Like it has the highest market value of all compost out there because it's like worm castings. It's their poop, right? Like they eat it and they poop it out. So it's broken down like even finer, and there's even more bacteria, like healthy stuff that creates the soil that we want for our food compared to just like normal composting. So worms are a good thing.
They are a good thing. I had a similar experience, related. I bought the little tower, I bought the worms, and we were producing so many food scraps that I felt like it was too many to put in at one time for the worms that I had. So I froze some of it, and then I took it out, when they were starting to get low on food. and I got impatient letting it thaw out, so I just threw it all the scraps, and they're still kind of frozen. And I had the
froze your worms.
So I had them in my laundry room. The little tower was in my laundry room, and I woke up the next morning, got out of bed, and found a worm on my bedroom floor. And I was like, "What happened?" And I looked, and they had all tried to abandon ship, when I had thrown the frozen scraps, and that was not fun to clean up. And I felt really bad, of course, for the poor worms.
So that was my question: is do you keep a lid on it? Do you put holes in it? I mean, I'm guessing they need some oxygen or access to.
I have one of those stackable towers, and it has the holes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just drilled holes into the lid of like one of those bins, so it had oxygen, but they didn't last long.
It was a sauna. Aw, poor worms. So this might be a dumb question, but if you wanted to start your own, I guess you could just go find a few worms and cut them in half. And is that cruel and unusual? Because they grow a new worm, right? Like when you chop them up.
I have no idea. That sounds kind of horrible.
Some of them. I feel like in school I learned that you chop one and then it's just two worms. Because anyways, that's gross.
That might be true. I think there's certain kind of worms that are better for composting, right, Jennifer?
Yeah, I think, wasn't it like red worms?
Mm-hmm. Red regulars, I think, are the...
I don't know. I do recall learning that in school as well, but I don't know if I would want to cut up my worms, because they, they're not cheap, I guess, when you buy the red wiggler. I don't remember. How much are they? You bought some, didn't you, recently?
I did. It's been a long time. They're not that bad. You get like 200 for, I don't know, maybe $20 or something like that.
Well, if you do it outside on the ground, if you have it in the right spot, they'll just find your compost bin. That's what happened with mine. So eventually, hopefully they'll find you. Jen, you said you had some experience with bokashi composting as well?
Yeah, so before we went like full-blown commercial composting at Fort Hood, we tried a couple different just small scale things at the environmental office. We did the tumbler that's fully enclosed. And then we also tried bokashi. So the difference between bokashi is it is the one kind of small scale composting option available if you want to do meat and dairy products. And there's the bokashi is just the brand name for the system that exists, where you would they kind of like sell you this compost additive that you sprinkle over the food. It kind of looks like a 5-gallon bucket, but it has a little spigot at the bottom where you can drain off the liquid. So again, food waste is mostly water. So when the food starts to decompose in that kind of closed environment, you get a lot of this water that you would drain out the bottom of the bokashi bin. They call it compost tea. And so you can dilute that mixture with water to water your plants. Some of the ladies in our office loved it. So everyone was fighting over the compost tea in the office. But yeah, it was just something we had in our kitchen. And whenever we were done, the bokashi was full with just, again, whatever scraps were left over in the kitchen from people eating lunch or breakfast throughout the day, we had the little tumbler outside. And so that's where we would add in, because that's full nitrogen ingredient. So we would throw it in the tumbler outside, and we would add the leaves or twigs or those kinds of things that we found just around the outside of the office to get the right carbon to nitrogen ratio. So you would still need something outside, I guess, at a certain point. But it's just an option to have meat and dairy in your composting.
So I also had one of those years and years ago, and that was the step I was missing. So I just remember it getting so gross and nasty, and it was like this congealed mess, and I couldn't figure out how to, it never turned into compost, right? Everything just kind of rotted, and I didn't put it outside and mix it with something. So that was my issue, I guess. And I eventually got rid of it because it was bad.
Yeah, so you kind of have to have a champion in your office if this is kind of like where you want to have it versus your house. But the problem is our coworker Marlena, who was really all about it, left. And so when she left, we kind of like abandoned ship. But you basically have to empty the bokashi and put it in outside bin and still kind of do like the composting process. But I
Yeah,
guess
and
whatever
also, oh, go ahead.
that additive that they give you when you buy the bokashi, that kind of just helps break down, I guess, the meat and the dairy products a little bit better.
Yeah, I was going to say also that stuff was a little expensive, I think. So that was another deterrent because you have to layer that every time you put fresh stuff in, and then, you know, one bag of it, I don't remember how much it cost. But it is a good alternative if you want something in the house, you know, that you can fill up and not have to go outside all the time. So, yeah. All right. So, we've talked about what compost is. We've talked about a few different types of composting. Did we miss anything? Are there any other types that we didn't discuss, or anything else you want to add?
Well, I did want to add that it can be a little bit overwhelming if you think about, if you've never composted before and it's something you want to do, you can get online and just get instantly overwhelmed by, types of composting, static area, turning the piles, greens to browns. But the truth is that composting happens with or without us. So, you throw your food out in a pile, it's going to compost itself over time. And there are the things that we're talking about are things that you can do to speed up the process of composting, so that you can use the finished product faster. But I guess I just want to encourage people not to get overwhelmed with composting, because it really is very simple.
What are some resources, books, or websites you would suggest for people wanting to get into it?
So I am a big fan of Joe Gardner. His website, joegardner.com. He does a podcast, and he has some really comprehensive free guides online. And he has a really great comprehensive guide to composting. It's a free download. I think it's a PDF, and it's just really good. So I recommend that one. joegardner.com.
Joe, Joe, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely got like way bogged down in the details of composting when we first started the facility at Fort Hood. So it has to be perfect. We have to measure the temperature, and we got even like this probe to measure like CO2 and oxygen levels. We got like a moisture meter, and you do need those things in the beginning to kind of learn like what you're doing. We learned how to do bulk density, and I was like, what is that? And so, yeah, there's all these crazy terms. And, when you do commercial composting, especially with meat and dairy, it gets a little complicated. But yeah, when you're just doing fruits and vegetables and yard trimmings, like Michelle said, whether you turn it or not, or whatever you're doing, the minute you turn it, the bugs will start coming back and doing their thing. So you don't have to worry too much.
And as far as equipment, I'm kind of a little bit of a nerd about it. And so I bought myself a compost thermometer just for my own personal pile. And, if that's something that you're kind of interested in monitoring, is the temperature of the pile. They make compost thermometers that have a really long, like a prong that fits down into the middle of the pile. And so you can kind of monitor the temperature. And you want to ideally get it to a minimum of 130 degrees. If you're really being, I guess, intentional about your composting, you want it to get to 130 degrees at least for several days. And what that does is kill any seeds or pathogens that might be in the things you put in the compost.
At what point will it catch fire? What temperature do you get concerned about that? Above like boiling point, or?
I think it's like it can happen anywhere between like 170 and up, honestly. And it's kind of like the perfect storm conditions. There's a lot of these facilities we toured in Texas where they just have, I swear their piles were like 50 feet high, and it was just of like feedstocks. Wow. So they chip up all this wood, or they, just have all these, they have like, all their separate feedstock. So they'll have like their wood and their leaves, and then their residential compost stuff that they pick up, and they just keep stockpiling because their site is too small. And yeah,
how high can we get it?
Yeah, I guess I don't really know. Like some of these companies, I get it, they're in it for a profit, and so they just accept whatever people are willing to give them for the price, right? So if they run out of room on their site, they just build it higher, I guess. So yeah, there was this one site we went to and they were just like, yeah, the firefighters know us and we already know how to like tell them how to like put it out. And and honestly, water really doesn't do just like a good job. You have to learn how to properly snuff out the oxygen. That's what's feeding the fire. So they
Yeah,
use
'cause
equipment.
mulch and stuff, I know if something catches fire, it can actually simmer and you have to like get really far down or it'll travel. So I imagine compost is kind of similar, right? Where it'll move through if it's long enough or something. Not
Yeah, I heard
we're
some
not trying to
stories
scare
where
people
they would
away
like
from it.
they would be on fire for a long time. But again, this is all large scale commercial stuff. Like it's very
Right.
rare that it would ever happen in your backyard pile. So we recommend you keep your pile, shorter than like 3 feet or something like that. So you don't have to worry about fires.
So let's talk about how one can actually build a bin in their yard out of just everyday items. For instance, the one that we built was out of old pallets. We just nailed or affixed these pallets together using some creative means. Some of them we had to put another board and kind of attach them together. But I saw at a presentation last night someone that built them out of cinder blocks, which is really cool. Like it was just an open bin that you could walk up to, and the cinder blocks were kind of three sides of it. What other, I guess, creative ways have you seen people make some, or outdoors in the open air or the closed concept?
I've seen people get those trash cans. I don't know how many cans there are, maybe 30 with the lid, Rubbermaids. And you can drill some holes in it and they've strapped the lids tight with, bungee cords or something. And you just put your inputs every once in a while. And then you just roll the trash can back and forth. And that works to agitate it and introduce some more air into the pile.
That's so smart. I bought like a super expensive one at like Tractor Supply.
I think I've seen that too now that you say that, and I've never tried it, but
yeah, it was like this basically, it was just like a trash can on its side and it had a little base with wheels on it so you could like roll it, but like roll it in place, I guess. But when that thing got like halfway or whatever full, I could barely turn it in place. So I finally just like pushed that sucker off the base and I just started rolling it along the ground. Yeah, so again, once the worms melted, I was like, we need a tumbler in the backyard. And actually, it was a nice place to kind of like put all of your yard waste and food waste and stuff. And then we eventually built a garden to grow food, which, by the way, Swiss chard and basil and greens, like collard greens, go crazy. They grew like year round. They didn't die at all. So you can put this compost in your garden and grow food. That's kind of the whole point of all this, right? I kind of want to touch on that too, Cami.
Yeah, go for it.
So we have all this lovely food that we grow. We spend tons of money to produce it, and the government subsidizes the farmer so that they can get it to the supermarkets for us. So transportation costs, fuel, water, all those things, right? And a lot of it ends up going into the landfill. So we talked about that at the last episode, food waste side of things. But when we capture that food waste from going into the landfill and we compost it, we're basically bringing those nutrients back into the food cycle. So it's kind of like that closed loop system for our food cycle. So I don't know the statistics necessarily off the top of my head, but soil is very depleted right now of nutrients. And a lot of that is just from the farming, like mass farming systems that we've had for the past 100 years. So it's important to know that if you can grow your own food and it's local, like that's the most sustainable, most environmentally friendly option that you could go with. So anyways, that's my little pitch for that. But I know not everyone wants to grow their own food or doesn't have, a backyard. Like I don't have a backyard right now, so I can't. But I support the local farmer markets, and yeah, if you have this composting system like Michelle does, you can sell that compost to local farmers at some point, or, I don't know what your future business model is going to look like, but yeah, you can start selling food that you've grown from this compost. And that helps your food have more vitamins and minerals in it, which is better for your health and well-being. A lot of people think they're like, oh, I ate my apple today. Well, like 100 years ago, that apple probably had 10 times more vitamins in it than it does today. And that's just because of all the pesticides and GMOs and, the soil depletion issues that we have going on.
And I'm sure. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the typical way that people garden, traditional non-organic gardening is, they're trying to deal with the plant. So they use chemical fertilizers in the soil. They use, chemical pesticides on the plant. But when you use compost in the garden, you're feeding the soil, which feeds the plant. And the benefit of using compost in gardening for the earth is that you're reducing the use of these, fertilizers and pesticides in the earth at all. But also, the fertilizer is just made with 10-10-10 NPK. But the compost is more comprehensive. It's got a lot more vitamins and micro, nutrients and all of that in it. And it binds to the plant better than the chemical fertilizers. So the chemical fertilizers will be washed away a lot easier, but compost stays with the plant better. So it's just a better choice anyway for growing food.
Yeah, and I also know that using compost retains water a lot better in the soil too. So especially in Texas, if you're having to water every single day because you feel your soil, you stick your finger in it or whatever, and you can tell that the soil is just dry as a bone. Part of that is you don't have the right soil mixture going on. And so adding compost into that could help. So, Michelle, I'm curious, what is your like mix ratio with compost to like just your regular dirt that you have in your backyard, or how are you building this garden?
So I think the scientific answer is you strive for 5% organic matter. I don't really know how that breaks down. It's supposed to be about a third of the soil is organic matter. And so, I'm filling my bed with topsoil for now, and then at about the last third of it will be compost. And then eventually over time, each season at the beginning and end of the growing season, you can put, top dress your bed again with compost, and over time it just improves the value of the soil. So over the years, you get better and better and better gardens.
So once you have, you start it with the topsoil and the compost, you just need to add the compost, or do you need to add, anything else over the years, like any other dirt? It just breaks down.
Yeah, you can really do a lot of things. I mean, there's so much stuff you can add to soil, but really, if you want to just keep it simple, compost is pretty nutritionally complete.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just going to add to what Jen was saying, like, even if you don't want to grow your own food, but you have the capacity and the desire to compost, I am sure there are community gardens, farmers, neighbors, someone who would take your compost. So definitely consider that. Don't just think, oh, I'm not going to use it myself, because it's a gold mine for the people that do use it, and it would definitely help someone out. So,
and we're talking a lot about vegetable gardens, but even if you don't have a vegetable or a flower garden, you can put it on your lawn. It's good for, it's just good to improve the soil all around.
Yeah, so that was kind of what we were looking at Fort Hood, is to just sell it to, because everybody likes to have their green grass in Texas. So there's a lot of bald spots, right? And like people will do all kinds of crazy things to their yard, especially like throwing fertilizers and Roundup and all this crazy stuff. So surprisingly, I did like a few little test areas with just some spots that weren't growing well, and just kind of like, because you have exposed dirt at that point, so you can just kind of till it in to the top kind of layer of soil with the compost, and throw down some more seed if you need to, depending on what type of grass you have and yeah, it did just great. So, like, yeah, there's a lot of cities that take the wastewater treatment plant sludge and they turn that into compost using, like, the cities also have their yard waste. So the city sludge, which is our poop, and the yard waste is the carbon source. So poop is nitrogen, carbon is the leaves and the branches and all that stuff. And so they'll mix all that together and they turn that into a compost as well. So if you don't want to, but like spend as much money maybe at like Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever to buy these bags of compost, there's a lot of these. If you just go to the compost center in Colleen, they sell it right there. So it's like $10, and I think sometimes you can just, like, however much you can fit in the back of your car. So that's an option for folks out there. If you're not worried about growing food necessarily, you just want to try to make your grass prettier, that's like a cheap option compared to some of the synthetic fertilizer chemical options that you would find at the store.
Awesome. Yeah, so many awesome resources out there for anyone interested in starting to use them and or making your own. So cool. So let's go on, Jen. I know you said you had some things you wanted to talk about as far as the health benefits and other just benefits to composting. Is there anything we haven't touched on already that you wanted to add in?
I think in general, it's a hard concept for some people to think about the problems going on the planet, right? Like, it's so overwhelming and it's beyond anything that one person, might be able to make a difference. So it's all of us coming together, making these individual decisions and choices to do the right thing that's for your own health and well-being, but it also relates to the overall health and well-being of the planet and the environment and everyone. So again, back to kind of like that social side of things. If you're composting, you're creating a better soil, you're creating a better vegetable or fruit, or if you have an herb garden, whatever it is, and that's food that you're putting in your body, you're going to feel a lot healthier. You're not going to have these pesticides and chemicals that you're going to be ingesting. Like, if you choose to buy organic, for me, the extra dollar is worth it. Like, I'm constantly like looking at the berry aisle in produce and I'm like, oh man, like, regular blueberries are $3 and organic ones are $4, but to know that I'm not going to be ingesting those chemicals and pesticides and everything they spray on our food and they put in the soil, I'm like, $1 is worth it. So just think about that. Think about your own health and well-being in general. Food is everything. The gut is like kind of like the source of all of your immunity and your health in your body. So everything you put in your body has an effect on you mentally, physically, emotionally. You have all sorts of domino effects that happen. So I just wanted to tie that in with the food discussion we had last week and making the right choices with composting. Just kind of throw that out there, food for thought.
Food for thought.
There you go.
Yeah, the health benefits are great, and there's also just so many environmental benefits to composting. It diverts all that waste from the landfill, right? And a lot of the organic waste is what causes the methane buildup in landfills, which is a big contributor of global warming, greenhouse gases. And composting can actually kind of serve as a carbon sink in the dirt. It rather than releasing it holds it in and lets us, put it to good use and make more energy, and it's that circular cycle. So, yeah, huge environmental benefits in addition to everything you said too, which, I think kind of goes without saying.
I kind of wanted to touch on the cost of things too. I know in general, whether you're a city or you're an individual in your home, you're kind of like, oh man, this extra effort to separate my food, or as a city to fund an additional program, an additional route to pick up, right? Like Michelle has to go pick up these food scraps from individual houses. So that's an extra effort for everybody involved. But we just wanted to highlight the benefits of that, because although, yes, you have to put it in a separate container, the savings might not always be, I guess, like the financial savings might not always be something that you can just see on the surface. There's a lot of like second, third, and fourth order effects that you're not necessarily like taking into consideration. So again, some people might not think about their medical bills in the future, right? Like, because they're not relating the fact that if you eat organic produce that you've put in your own backyard, and the savings from having to go to the grocery store to buy those things. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, there's a lot of different aspects involved with the cost of doing recycling as well. Plastic, paper, cardboard, all those things have to get sent to other factories to get recycled and processed. But it still costs the city extra money for that extra route, and there's not always a return on that. But the environmental benefits overall are still outweighing the costs that we just see up front.
Right. One another cost savings on a much smaller scale, but you see it a lot more immediately. Like in Colleen, you get to pick what size trash can you have. So I have the smallest trash can that they offer, and I maybe put it out to the road once a month because I recycle and I compost. So I might have a bag of trash a week that I put out there, mostly just so it doesn't smell in my house. But you save a little money here and there. I mean, if a few dollars a month adds up, if you get the smaller bin, you're saving $5-10 a month, whatever it is. So money savings is definitely a great motivator for a lot of folks too.
So Michelle, how much does your business, or if I wanted to sign up, what would it cost?
So if you decided that you wanted your bucket picked up every week, it would be $5 a pickup, which comes out on average to about $20 a month. And then if you decided you only wanted it picked up every other week, then it's $8 a pickup, and that comes out to about $16 on average a month.
But she doesn't go to San Antonio, sorry.
I know, I'm just...
I think I'm going to have to raise the rates for San Antonio.
You know what? The next time I go to the farmer's market, I'm going to go talk to that booth and see what they charge, because I would imagine $5 is a lot cheaper than probably what they charge here, which is actually strange now that I think about it, because they do have curbside recycling for the city. So maybe they're trying to get to the folks that don't. I don't know. San Antonio, I'm still figuring it out, but apparently if you're within, certain boundaries, you're allowed to get this San Antonio curbside recycling, composting, and trash. But I think there's all these little pockets right around outside of downtown that they have their own, maybe their own deal going on for waste pickup and all that. So anyways, when I talk to them, I'll find out what they charge.
Let me know.
Yeah.
I wanted to say too, I'm not sure if, I think we've kind of touched on it, but I don't know if we've said outright that landfills are the largest man-made source of greenhouse gases. And what I read is that up to 40% of what we throw away can be composted. And that's just composted, but that's not even including the things that you could recycle. So, there's so much that we could take out of our waste stream. Could you imagine if we even cut just the 40% that, everybody throws away and did something more sustainable with that waste? What a big difference that would make.
Yes, definitely. And I guess if someone is trying to decide, do I want to invest in a program similar to Michelle, or take on the effort themselves in their own backyard, I would kind of challenge you to do the research and really look into the overall benefits of doing it. So social, environmental, and financial. The triple bottom line is kind of what you would consider. So there's a lot of different decision-making metrics out there for environmental concepts. And so if you're trying to justify like cost benefit ratio for things, it's not just dollars and cents. Like there's other aspects that don't necessarily have like a financial attachment to it. So again, like health and well-being and having energy. There's a lot of people that have Synthroid or as like a prescription from their doctor because they have thyroid issues going on. They didn't even, and there's like 60% of people out there that don't even know that they have a thyroid issue. They just feel tired all the time and they can't lose weight and they don't understand what's going on in their health and their body. And again, that all goes back to the food that we're putting into our bodies. So if you can make compost or create compost or contribute to this compost, it will make everyone's soils a lot healthier and our food a lot healthier and the environment a lot healthier.
Absolutely. Anything else you guys want to touch on before we move on to our green life hacks? Thing we did not cover. I think we covered quite a bit. We gave folks a lot of options, ideas, resources. And of course, if you have any other questions, you can always reach out to us on Facebook and we will answer your question or ask Michelle if she has an answer for you if we don't know. But yeah, if there's nothing else.
I have one more thing.
Okay.
So I don't know, maybe a lot of people aren't plugged into like their city or their county where they live, but there are a ton of resources available on their website. So depending on where you live, just do a quick search and find out what your composting options are. So, because they're all very regional, depending on where you're at and what the city offers. So there might just be drop-off locations for compostables. There might be these companies like Michelle. If you're in the Killeen to Temple, Salado area, she can service you. But there's a lot of different opportunities out there to compost if you don't want to do it yourself. And so just do a quick search. Like I didn't know where the drop-off zones were in San Antonio for recycling when I didn't have my bins yet when I first moved here. Like, so there's just those types of things that you have to kind of take some of this stuff on yourself and do a quick search to find out what's available out there for you to compost.
Absolutely. There's so much information. So yeah, doing a Google search, talking to people, great way to stay informed. Alrighty. Michelle, did you have anything else you wanted to touch on before we?
I don't think so. I think you covered it all.
Okay. Well, thank you for being on. Before we go, we're going to talk or do our green life hack. So every show we talk about something, either a product or a practice that we've adopted that we really feel has made us, live a greener life, helped us live more sustainably. So I've kind of talked about mine already on the show, but I'm going to make my life hack the awesome compost bins that we built. I don't know if you guys can see, it's on my phone, but we built them out of the pallets, like I said, and there's 3 standing up with 2 in the back. And so right now I only have stuff on one side, but the plan is that gets built up, let that kind of brew and cook. And then, as I flip it, eventually I'll start filling the other side up while that becomes actual dirt. So my old compost bin still has all the old dirt in it that isn't quite broken down, but I have some like volunteer potatoes growing in it right now. So I don't want to disturb them because it's kind of cool that they just started growing out of old potatoes. And I hope I didn't lose them in the freeze we had last night because the leaves are completely brown now after the cold snap, even though I covered them. So anyways, yeah, you get cool surprises sometimes when you have food waste like onions, potatoes, things that do good and being buried and just resprout. So
yeah, we got some beautiful volunteer tomatoes and sunflowers last year.
What? I never get tomatoes.
We had our very first thing at the Fort Hood compost site by accident growth was the cantaloupe. Like there was a bunch of cantaloupe seeds that I guess kind of dropped off the edges. Like the corners and the edges of your pile don't get as hot, and so they're not going to get to the temperature they need to get to kill off those seeds. And so yeah, we just had this like random vine of like cantaloupe growing.
Did you keep it?
Yeah, they ate some of it. I was too afraid. I freaked out a little bit.
Like, what was in that dirt? That's awesome. I love stuff like that when things just pop up unexpectedly and survive. That shows like, like Darwin at work, they were like really wanting to live. Jen, what is your green life hack?
So I already showed you guys all my cool compost stuff on previous podcasts. I think I should start like planning this a little bit better to match the theme of our conversation. But anyways, this is definitely off topic. But this is my crystal deodorant that I use instead of all that crap that you can buy at the store. It's literally like salt crystal. So you just, let me take this lid off.
And it actually works because every natural deodorant I've tried does not work.
Do you not read this? It says 24-hour protection. Okay?
Would your husband agree that deodorant works?
Yeah. So just so you know, the smell of sweat, like in your armpit, is actually bacteria. So it's not that you have like some weird thing like coming out of your armpit that's just like smelly. It's just bacteria on your skin and in your body that's kind of like creating this smell. So basically you take this and I run it under the sink to get it like a little bit wet, and you just like put it under your armpit like this. And it's basically like salt water. So you're just putting like salt water on your skin. And as you know, salt kills bacteria. So over time, as you clean up your diet and you're not eating foods that, are going to create like weird environments for bacteria and things to be like going on in your system, you're really like your sweat really shouldn't be stinky. So a lot of people, like I know guys especially, like they'll buy deodorant because they don't want to sweat. Like they want something that's going to like prevent the pores from having.
Yeah.
Right. So that is actually not healthy for you. Like your body is meant to sweat for a reason. Like it's getting toxins out of your body. And so when you put antiperspirant on, it's full of all kinds of like aluminum and parabens and all these things that can cause problems in your system. And that we can have a whole separate like health podcast on all this stuff. So anyways, this is another brand that I use. It's smaller. This is my travel size one. So all the traveling I do, it's a lot smaller. And it says no aluminum, chlorohydrate, fragrance, and paraben free. So just take a look at your deodorant situation, ladies and gentlemen, because there's some stuff in those brands at the grocery store that you buy that are like no bueno.
Yeah, I have a friend who actually said she like, used alcohol to like, I don't know, reset and kill whatever, and then she didn't have to use deodorant at all because it got rid of all the bacteria and she never smells, or and if she sweats it doesn't smell. And I was just like, I tried that and it didn't work. Like I tried it after she said it didn't work for me, but I only did it once, and then I was like, I have to go to work and be around people. I can't afford to be like, experiment with this when I'm out in the public. So,
well, I've been using it for about 2 or 3 years, and yeah, there's no smell. Like I sweat like a normal human being is supposed to sweat, but yeah. If you think about like how long do you think you've been wearing deodorant? Like 20, 30, I don't know, however old we are, right?
20 years, yeah.
Every day for 20, 30 years, like you have this buildup residue of this product, this one product. We're not even talking about all the other shit we put on our body or in our body day after day. This is just one thing. And so, yeah, you can do like armpit detox basically, which is probably what you were mentioning. So yeah, I would just look into it. It's one one small step you can start like getting your regimen a little bit more clean for your body and for the environment. Because the way that they make these things and the ingredients that go in it and the waste that's involved and all that stuff. So anyways, that's mine.
That's awesome. I'm all about it. I've been looking for one that works, but like I said, everyone I tried, I still.
I think we need to have a podcast about like beauty products and cleaning products and like how to get, I don't know, maybe there's brand names out there that people have tried and they like, but there's also stuff you can make yourself, you know? So yeah, next topic.
Absolutely. All right, Michelle, what's your green life hack?
So I brought my my bamboo toothbrush, and so these are really cool because once you use it up, you just cut or remove the bristles, and then you can throw the whole bamboo, the handle, into the compost pile. And bamboo is a more sustainable resource, and it's good instead of the typically plastic toothbrushes that end up in the landfill.
What brand is that?
This one is, I'm gonna hold the box. It's Wow, but with an E at the end.
Wowie.
Wowie.
So I have heard that they make some that even the bristles are compostable, but if that's the case, then it's like, how does it hold up and actually brush your teeth? Because they're made out of like some bean composite thing. I don't know. But okay, so I've had a compostable or a bamboo toothbrush for a while now, and I finally, switched to a new one 2 days ago, and I start brushing with it, and this one has black bristles, and the other one had white bristles. So as I'm brushing, I'm feeling the bristles like fall out in my mouth. So it was like hairs. It felt like there were hairs in my mouth as I'm brushing. Hasn't done it since that first time, I think, just because it was getting the loose ones out. But yeah, it's pretty gross. And then when I spit, my toothpaste was a little like dark because I guess the color rubbed off.
What is it made out of?
Brand I don't know. I think maybe that brand is one of the ones I was talking about, but I got it in this box, the subscription box I used to subscribe to with, earth-friendly products. They'd send you every month, and that was one of them, and I don't even know. They went out of business. But anyways, it was pretty gross. It was like spitting out hairballs as I'm brushing my teeth, but I do love bamboo.
I think this is going to be good. I like this idea of like finding tried and true brands of these like environmentally and more healthy alternatives. So like that way I don't have to waste the money on buying this toothbrush,
Right.
that you've already tried and like you don't like. So yeah, we need to get like our next speaker needs to be like some guru on all these.
I bet Chris has some good ideas too, because she's been doing this for a long time.
I'm gonna do some research on like somebody that has just like a list. Like I just want a list of what I should buy and be done. Like, right? Because there's so much money we waste on all kinds of stuff that we're like, oh, this is gonna be the best shampoo ever, and then it's terrible.
And use it one time or 1 week and it doesn't work, and then you're stuck with a giant bottle of it.
Yep.
I think there's a push too for people to start making their own products. I think you touched on it a little bit, like using coconut oil and their own jars. And so it's not only natural ingredients, but it's also zero waste.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember we talked about it in a couple of podcasts, like making your own stuff, using essential oils, baking soda vinegar to clean stuff. So yeah, I think we should definitely go in deeper on that topic at some point.
Yeah. I've started getting the ingredients for washing detergent to make my own once I finally use up the giant bottle I had. So we'll see how that goes. All right. So I think that's everything we had for this show. Jen, where can we find you online?
On Sustainably Geeky.
Awesome. Michelle, where can we find you online?
So I am on Facebook and Instagram at The Green Plant Biz, B-I-Z.
Okay, awesome. And you can find me here on Sustainably Geeky, Epically Geeky once in a while. I haven't been on that in a while. Marginally Geeky, which is our book club podcast. And Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Het's Gonna Be Me. That's my personal handle. And then, of course, the show is available on Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. And then we're also on Facebook at Sustainably Geeky. So you can message us on Facebook or YouTube, comment, share your thoughts, send us show ideas. We love hearing from you guys and interacting. And real quick, I had a thought as we were doing that. You were talking about we should do reviews of products, Jen. If there are any products out there that would like to get with us and help, sponsor that kind of thing, we would love to talk to you. So definitely reach out to us. With that, we record usually the second Tuesday of the month, and then we get the show up within the next week or so. So be looking for us around the middle of the month. And again, if you have any ideas, let us know. We are not sure what our next topic's going to be, but it sounds like it might be something about reviewing hygiene and household products. So stay tuned. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a good night.